Good afternoon and welcome to IBA News this 4th of July. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy joining you live from Jerusalem. A short time ago, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu participated in a ceremony at Entebbe Airport in Uganda, marking the 40th anniversary of the successful raid by Israeli commandos of the airport terminal, rescuing over 100 Israeli and Jewish hostages and the Air France crew held by armed terrorists. Israel is coming back to Africa and Africa is coming back to Israel, said the Prime Minister on the tarmac before unveiling a plaque. The Prime Minister's older brother Yoni was killed leading the mission. Today's ceremony with Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni marks the first day of Netanyahu's 5-day state visit to 4 sub-Saharan African countries: Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya and Ethiopia. Netanyahu is now set to meet with 7 African leaders from Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Zambia and Tanzania. Accompanying the Prime Minister are some 80 Israeli businessmen from 50 companies. The visit is intended to strengthen the political and trading ties between Israel and African states. This is the first official visit by an Israeli Prime Minister to sub-Saharan Africa since the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir in 1987. 40 years ago today, Israeli special forces stunned the world by flying 40,000 kilometers under cover of darkness to rescue over 100 hostages from a hijacked Air France flight held by armed Palestinian and German terrorists at the Ugandan airport with the support of Ugandan dictator Idi Amin. To honor the occasion, the Israeli army released secret audio tapes, including debriefing sessions conducted by the Air Force following the raid. Former Air Force Commander Major General Benny Peled is heard telling then Chief of Staff Mota Gur that he had doubts the mission would succeed and feared that it would be too dangerous to land planes at a hostile airport in the middle of the night. Other options considered at the time included renting boats to ferry commandos across Lake Victoria and parachuting Israeli forces onto a nearby beach. The mission was codenamed Operation Thunderbolt, but later renamed Operation Jonathan in honor of Lieutenant Colonel Yoni Netanyahu, the Sayeret Matkal commander, killed in the early stages of the 90-minute raid. Here to discuss Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Africa is Gil Haskell, head of the Foreign Ministry's International Development Cooperation Department, Mashav, and Israel's former ambassador to Kenya and Uganda. Ambassador, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
We just saw some incredible footage of the Ugandan army giving our Prime Minister a guard of honor, only 40 years after the same army supported the terrorists at the Entebbe crisis. When did Uganda become a friendly country to Israel?
First of all, I'm not sure it's the same army, because after the regime of Idi Amin, Uganda underwent a coup, actually, by a group that President Museveni of today belonged to, and there's a whole transformation of the system and of the army. But it is true that it's in a way chilling to see the same Ugandan soldiers saluting the Israeli Prime Minister. I would say that immediately after the toppling down of Idi Amin in 1977, Uganda started changing its nature towards the world and towards Israel as well.
Is it fair to characterize Uganda as a fully fledged ally of Israel, or where do we stand?
Today, Uganda is a highly friendly country towards Israel. I think in Africa it is considered a full-fledged ally of the State of Israel. I myself was privileged enough to be the Israeli ambassador to Uganda, and I had also a salute from the same soldiers as an ambassador, and President Museveni is one of the most friendliest presidents on the African continents today.
Okay, well, looking forward, how can we expect the Prime Minister's high-profile visit to impact on Israel-Africa relations in future?
Well, I think today in general is a very emotional day for anybody who follows Israeli-African relations. The fact that, first of all, we're marking a 40th anniversary of the raid on Entebbe, which is a landmark in Israeli-African relations, no matter in which way you look at them. And if you combine that with the fact that an Israeli Prime Minister with a huge delegation has landed on African soil today for the first time in 30 years, I think this combination of realpolitik and the heritage of Entebbe is highly significant for Israeli-African relations.
What sort of geopolitical shifts are we seeing then that could be driving this change?
Well, the geopolitical shifts have not started today. I think they started in the mid-90s when the African countries decided to establish diplomatic relations with Israel, full force ahead. And today we see almost the entire African continent very, very friendly towards Israel. I think the significance of this visit today is showing the seriousness of Israel in its intentions to strengthen the relations with Africa in all spheres.
Why do we think the Prime Minister chose to visit these countries specifically and not, for example, Cameroon, with which we also enjoy warm relations?
You know, there's a joke when you ask a gentleman why does he kiss a lady's hand, he says, well, we have to start somewhere. So I think you have to start once re-entering Africa on the highest political levels by an Israeli leader, you have to start somewhere. And these four East African, I would say in local terms, superpowers, emerging economies, very important political players in the African Union and in the Horn of Africa and East Africa region. And I think that these four countries should have been the first, but definitely not the last. And we hope to see the Prime Minister visiting West Africa and the southern part of Africa. And I think this is a very significant day in the history of Israel and that continent.
Okay, let's take a brief look at the content of Israel's relations with these countries. You head Israel's International Agency for International Development. What sort of works is Israel leading in sub-Saharan Africa?
Well, Mashav, the Israeli Agency for International Development Cooperation, and the Israeli Aid Program will celebrate its 60th anniversary next year.
Mazel tov.
Thank you. And up until today, we've trained more than 270,000 trainees in Israel and abroad in the developing world, a third out of which are from Africa. So more or less 100,000 Africans have been trained by Israelis, starting from 1957 when Golda Meir first visited as a foreign minister the continent of Africa. We try to bring the Israeli expertise into our relations with these countries, which is very unique because if you think of it, Israel is the only country that has developed itself from scratch.
So what are we talking? Aid programs, infrastructure work, agricultural assistance?
We're doing all. We're doing first and foremost agricultural assistance. I would say that Africa today has four main challenges: food insecurity, water insecurity, border insecurity, and personal insecurity. And in all these spheres, we are working very, very fiercely with our African allies and friends in order to bring the Israeli experience and to tackle these challenges, meaning to bring food security to Africa, water security, so you'll have water flowing for all African citizens. You'll have border security, which is a crucial growing problem in Africa, and personal security, which again is a problem that is one of the hurdles in the development of Africa today.
Ambassador, thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Thank you.
The IDF struck 2 Syrian military targets Sunday in response to stray Syrian fire that hit areas close to Israel's northern border security fence, the army revealed today. Yesterday's incident is not the first time that errant fire has spilt into Israel, whether from rebel forces or the Syrian army itself. The Israeli military stressed that while the gunfire emanating from Syria did not endanger Israeli residents or security forces near the border, the army is determined to respond to what it describes as any unusual incident. In a move that is expected to draw fire from the international community, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman approved the construction of some 800 new housing units in Jewish neighborhoods in Jerusalem and just beyond the Green Line, and 600 units for Arabs living in East Jerusalem too. Yesterday's decision concerns 560 housing units in Ma'ale Adumim outside Jerusalem, 140 units in the capital's Ramot neighborhood, and 100 in Har Choma. Netanyahu and Lieberman also approved the building of 600 new homes in the Arab neighborhood of Beit Safafa in East Jerusalem. While the move was welcomed by lawmakers on the right, some objected to the units for Jerusalem's Arab population, saying in the wake of the recent terror attacks, it is important to maintain a Jewish majority in the capital. At the same time, they also demanded that Israel formally declare sovereignty over Ma'ale Adumim. Indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas are underway to secure the return of the bodies of two IDF soldiers, Oron Shaul and Hadar Goldin, killed in Operation Protective Edge in 2014, as well as hostages Avera Mengistu and an Israeli Arab. This, according to unnamed Israeli officials who confirmed to the Hebrew daily Yediot Ahronot today that Hamas is demanding the release of 50 Palestinian security prisoners incarcerated in Israel, just as a precondition for opening negotiations. Israel does not negotiate directly with Hamas, the officials noted, adding the talks are being conducted through a third party seeking to reach preliminary understandings. According to the report, Hamas is demanding that Israel agree to a similar deal to that secured for the return of IDF soldier Gilad Shalit in 2011, when Israel released 1,027 Palestinian prisoners. Jerusalem informed the mediators that it rejects preconditions. Before dawn today, IDF forces arrested two brothers of the 17-year-old terrorist Mohammed Taraira, who stabbed to death 13-year-old Hallel Yafa Ariel as she slept in her bed in her Kiryat Arba home last Thursday. Over the weekend, security forces arrested Taraira's sister after she praised her brother's actions. Israeli security officials suspect she knew in advance of her brother's plans to attack. 5 other Palestinian terror suspects were also arrested. Meanwhile, the coordinator of government activities in the territories, Major General Yoav Mordechai, yesterday banned the governor of Hebron, Kamal Hamid, from entering Israel after he paid respects to the Taraira family. The closure imposed on Hebron and the surrounding area remains intact today as security forces continue the manhunt for the terrorists who fatally shot Rabbi Michael Mark on Friday near Otniel, injuring his wife and 2 children. Staying on the West Bank, overnight in the Kalandia refugee camp north of Jerusalem, the army demolished the homes of 2 Palestinian terrorists involved in stabbing attacks last year. During the process, fierce clashes erupted between Palestinians and Israeli security forces. Shots were fired at troops and rocks and stones were thrown at soldiers. Footage released by the army shows one of the homes being blown up in a controlled explosion. On the 23rd of December last year, Isa Asaf and Anan Chabsa fatally stabbed Rabbi Reuven Biermacher as he left the old city via Jaffa Gate. Passerby Ofer Ben Ari, who intervened to help, was also killed after police mistakenly shot him in the melee, initially believing that he was involved in the stabbing. Still with terrorism, the 2 Palestinian terrorists who perpetrated the deadly shooting attack on the 8th of June at Tel Aviv's Sarona market were inspired by the Islamic State, but not recruited by the organization, claims an indictment presented to the Tel Aviv court by the district prosecutor's office today. 4 Israelis were killed and 16 injured in the attack by cousins Khaled and Mahmoud al-Mehamara from the West Bank town of Yatta near Hebron. The terrorists were both captured alive. According to details released, the 2 had been plotting an attack since January this year and had initially planned to attack passengers on a train, but at the last minute chose the Sarona market instead. Former Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni of the Zionist Union has been granted special diplomatic immunity following an attempt by British authorities to summon her for questioning in connection to war crimes. The unprecedented police summons demanded that Livni, who served as Foreign Minister, Vice Premier and member of the Security Cabinet at the time of Operation Cast Lead in 2008, be questioned upon her arrival in London, where she is currently attending a conference hosted by the Haaretz newspaper. The request, which was delivered last Thursday, was cancelled following diplomatic mediation between Israel and Britain. Addressing the conference, Livni said the British legal system is being abused, developing into a theatre of the absurd when Israeli leaders come to London.
The fact that Israeli leaders, decision makers, and Israeli army commanders are forced to participate in a kind of the theater of the absurd when we come to London, this is something which is not acceptable. It's not a personal issue, it's a moral issue, and this is something that needs to be changed.
Former Defense Minister Binyamin Ben Eliezer is currently hospitalized at the Asaf HaRofeh Hospital in Srifin after suffering a suspected stroke. In recent years, the 80-year-old former Labour Party leader and presidential candidate has suffered from a series of health problems. Ben Eliezer, who left the Knesset in 2014 after a 3-decade political career, is embroiled in a series of criminal charges, including bribery, breach of trust, and money laundering. In December, he was indicted for allegedly receiving more than 2 million shekels from business people in exchange for actions he took as a public servant. Ben Eliezer was offered a plea bargain, mandating that he pay an 11 million shekel fine in return for not serving time in jail. Nochi Dankner, one of the country's most powerful businessmen, until now, was today found guilty of 6 offences, including illegal stock manipulation and charges related to securities fraud. The Tel Aviv District Court convicted Dankner, along with his associate Itai Strom, of illegally running shares at Dankner's IDB holding core in order to inflate their prices. Other charges included misleading investors and shareholders, failure to issue certain reports, and illegal use of assets under money laundering laws. In June 2014, Dankner was indicted by the Tel Aviv Economic Crimes Division in the Tel Aviv District Court for securities fraud. The maximal sentence Dankner now faces is 5 years in prison. Throughout his trial, the big business mogul has denied any wrongdoing and now has 45 days to appeal. Turning to regional news, Iraq has declared 3 days of mourning after its deadliest terrorist attack since 2007. Early yesterday morning, a huge explosion rocked Baghdad's Karada area, killing 165 people and injuring 225 others. The attack targeted civilians eating out and shopping late after the Ramadan fast. The Islamic State, ISIS, claimed responsibility for the attack, which involved a lorry laden with explosives and left the surrounding area smouldering in an inferno. The UN's Iraq envoy Jan Kubis said the Islamic State was seeking to avenge its losses in battlefront defeats after Iraqi forces dislodged it from its Fallujah stronghold. Another car bomb killed 5 in a Shiite neighborhood in northern Baghdad. Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has pledged to improve vehicle inspections on roads entering the city and to clamp down on fake bomb detectors, with which fraudsters have flooded Iraq. Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel was laid to rest yesterday in New York after passing away on Saturday at the age of 87. Relatives and friends attended the intentionally small and modest private funeral at a New York City synagogue. The Romanian-born Wiesel was best known for his campaign to entrench the memory of the Holocaust and condemn silence in the face of atrocities worldwide. His activism against violence, racism, and repression earned him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1986. World leaders stressed he was a powerful voice for universal human rights. A public memorial is expected at a later date.
The world has lost a courageous, moral voice. I think the Jewish people and Israel have lost a staunch defender. We, the survivors, have lost the voice of memory. And I personally lost a very special friend.
This is a tremendous loss, not only for the world, but also on a personal level for me. The ranks of the survivors are thinning. He was truly their voice. He was the witness.
The spire of One World Trade Center in New York was lit up in the blue and white colors of the Israeli flag last night in tribute to the man considered the world's best-known Holocaust survivor. May his memory be a blessing. In finance, shares are up on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange and the shekel is down against major currencies. Take a look. And in weather, tomorrow should be partially cloudy and temperatures will remain stable. Expect a chance of light summer rain in the north and along the coast. That's all for today. We'll be back again tomorrow. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy, wishing you a good evening and, especially for our American viewers, a very happy 4th of July, live from Jerusalem.